Welcome back to Dulcetterra 2020, everyone, an online interactive music festival, conference, and songwriting camp celebrating the International Day of Peace. We are here with discussion number 5, Enhancing Communities. First, we're going to start off by introducing our panelists. We have Stefan Brackett. Stefan has been rhyming words as a calling and profession for the last 12 years. He has toured the world with his band Flowbot, using music as a platform for engagement and collective empowerment. The band's platinum hit Handlebars has allowed Stefan to share the stage with many of his heroes, including Desmond Tutu, the Dalai Lama, Rage Against the Machine, Public Enemy, Bernie Sanders, and Emily Keys. It's awesome. His time as a philosophy student at Colorado State University nurtured his lifelong affair with the arts, education, and activism. Blending his passions, he co-founded the nonprofit Youth on Record in 2008. Youth on Record exists to empower Colorado's youth to achieve their academic, artistic, and personal best by employing local, professional artists as their educators. To date, Youth on Record has impacted the lives of thousands of young people, and after 11 years serving on the board of directors, Stefan is proud to join the staff this year as Director of Special Programs. Thank you for being here, Stefan.
It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Next up, we have Rue Johnson. Rue is a consultant, executive producer, and nightlife operations strategist. Rue is the owner of Rue Black Consulting. She specializes in taking clients from point A to point B, idea to execution with precision, grace, style, and substance. Having worked in the music industry with a background in politics and capacity building, Johnson believes art is the revolution and our very living is the resistance. Rue Black creates platforms of expression for hip-hop artists and other indies across the music spectrum, amplifying the voices of those not traditionally heard in the creative process. Thank you for being here today, Rue. Tonight, I should say. Thank you. And last but not least, we have the founder of this entire event today, the one and only Sam Golgun. Sam is the founder, president, and CEO of World Music Development. Sam has been in the music industry as a performer and event producer for over 25 years. He is also the owner of Magoon Productions, a music booking, production, and promotions company. With his strong belief in the power of music uniting people, having music as a catalyst for improving and enhancing our communities, and a discipline in giving back to his community, Sam founded World Music Development in August of 2012. Sam, thank you for organizing this whole event today and for getting us all together.
Thank you, Sarah, for all of your help in moderating all these panels all day long. I really appreciate all your help.
Of course, I'm happy to be here, and I'm honestly so excited to end the day with what I think is our most special panel and most important topic. So let's get started.
Okay.
Activism can be thought of as a nonviolent act to influence those in power to pursue a public good. 2020 has sparked a year of social change, and musicians are in a position to be a voice within their community, to act as a catalyst for change, and to foster community engagement. The first question I'm going to pose to everyone, we'll go ahead and start with Stefan and then go to Rue and then Sam. And whoever's not speaking, if you could just go ahead and put your video on mute so that the background noise doesn't come in, and then just unmute yourself whenever you answer. That would be great. All right. First question.
I just want to add something. Just I think in the spirit of what is happening right now and all these things, I just would feel far more comfortable if we let Rue lead, and then we kind of follow after what she says, because I just think that's also what needs to be happening more often. If you're okay with that, I don't want to presume anything, but I would just prefer to follow you. Is that okay, Rue?
Yeah, that's completely fine with me. Thank you. And so, okay, yeah. So, Sarah, can you just give me kind of the directive of the question, because Stefan made me want to say some other things, so I want to make sure that I'm like coupling all of those things in together.
Totally. Sure thing. So I'm going to start off, Rue. What are some ways that I, as a musician, can start to engage more in my own community?
So I think that artists and activism, and particularly musicians, you know, everyone is not necessarily going to be an activist in the traditional sense of the the word. But there is the expectation there that as a musician that you will have something to say about the happenings of the world and about the workings of the society that we live in. And no one is Nelson Mandela, right? No one is able to, no one is perfect at being able to meet this premise. But we, as consumers of music and people who kind of lean on musicians, we do expect musicians to have an opinion about things. And typically revolution or evolution or any kind of social uprising has always had the attachment of musicians as a part of being the soundtrack to that revolution, or periods of time have been marked by what musicians have had to say about it. And so I think that it's so important for musicians to feel comfortable speaking for their community based on what their community is giving back to them, based on what the community is saying that they need, to receive from people who are our leaders. And often musicians are considered the leaders of community. However, reluctantly, many might have to really be considered that. And I think that there are very basic things that artists can do, like being a part of the overall conversation. They can obviously use their music, use their art, use their marketing, use their voice, lend their voice and their talent to, events and other things that support change within the community. But I also think in recognizing the dynamics of what is happening is the energy shift through community, and that brings me to what Stefan said about asking allowing me the floor to kind of open this up, right? So what that shows to me is that many artists can see living within these communities what the shift looks like, and at this time, Black women specifically are kind of at the forefront of these social uprisings and also have been marginalized within the community in a way that our voices have not traditionally been heard. And that's musicians, and that's just regular people as well. So understanding the shifts and the dynamics within the community is going to be really important with how artists are informed about how they show up for their community. And I think another great example of that is this Lady Antebellum versus Lady A conversation, right? So Lady Antebellum thinks they're doing a really great job by dropping the antebellum from their title because it smacks of colonial racism. But what they're doing is in marginalizing a Black woman's voice by supposedly doing this thing that is supposedly good. So that's an example of wanting to show up for community because of what you're hearing on the overarching level of what many are doing during the social uprising and wanting to be on the right side of history, but then not having that extra layer of understanding of what's actually happening in the community. So then doing harm by marginalizing the voice of an artist who's already been there and already belongs to this marginalized identity in a lot of ways. Those are where artists really have to then pull back the layer instead of just showing up directly as they are. So thank you.
Thank you for that. I'd like to pose the same question to Stefan. What are some ways that an artist can start to engage more in their own community?
Oops, absolutely. And I just want to kind of talk this back. Rue, some of the work that you're doing now with one of the groups that you're organizing, I think is also like a beautiful example. If you want to like talk about that afterwards, because I don't want to just like keep on putting you on the spot. But I just feel like that's like a beautiful way of which you're allowing a pipeline for artists to stand up and exist and take change. Because I think one of the things that's come up from what you've said is that I think it's really important to look at what your first teachers are. And the music industry itself is predicated almost generally on taking the work of people from marginalized identities, Black, brown identities, poor white identities. I mean, this is where we see most of our genres come from. And what you do is you extract their IP and their value. You pay them pennies on the dollar. And so like to the point where musical assets now can be worth billions of dollars. But the people who made that music may have at best been millionaires at certain points in time. We have been taught as musicians that is success. We've been taught as musicians that the way that our voices are most validated is when we are sponsored by corporate entities that are taking our IP. So in that way, I think it also, one of the challenges is like we have not been taught in which ways our voices are also valid. We have not been trained in musical models where it's like, oh, like this is also success when I have this kind of connection to my community. And the other thing that we haven't been shown is that there's actually a whole other set of of livelihood, revenue, and sustainability in being able to have those kind of relationships. And honestly, that's been the model for music for thousands of years. And with the invention of the music industry as it is now, like it has only been in the last 80 years that we've seen this other kind of model where musicians actually do not have a lot of training in how to use their voices to represent their community. And that's no fault of their own. I mean, that's why we often find musicians who've made it very big. In the first few years, you see a lot of quote unquote blunders, but those blunders are just representations of a failure to pass the litmus of white supremacy at different points in time. It's like, oh look, I can't believe they're still doing this. Oh look, can you believe that they still live here, or they still talk like this, or they still dress in this way? All these different signifiers. It's like, well, why do they still have problems now that they're rich? Why do some of these rappers who are now millionaires still have issues with violence or these kind of connections? Money does not fix oppression. But we have this expectation, I think particularly of artists of color, music, and athletes of color, that it somehow does. So all of this in a roundabout way is we actually, there are organizations, there are people who are actually trying to bring artists to a place where they can experiment with using their voices in ways that are not market-facing. So there's a two-sided. They have to have places that make this available, or you can be like Flowbots. I felt like we just stumbled through it, and we made a whole bunch of mistakes, and through a bunch of community support, we got to some degree of fluency. But it's not easy. I think one of the main things I want to say is if artists are out there kind of struggling about how can they be more involved, I want them to understand that there hasn't been any kind of direct pipeline to make any of this stuff clear. So yes, but that doesn't mean that artists are incredibly innovative. We figure things out. That's one of the things that we're forced to do. So one of the other things I would also give is just start with where your heart breaks. There's a lot of ways that people can start telling you what you should do, but it's just that's like somebody telling you who to be in love with. Go to where your heart breaks, because in working on healing that wound, it will sustain you and give you some sort of energy to help you make it through all the stumbling blocks that you'll encounter as you're trying to figure out how to get it right. I could talk a lot about all these different things because I can go abstract to actually step-by-step implementation. That's one of the things we're trying to do at Youth on Record, because we feel like there's actual path of power for musicians and artists when they get connected to the roots of their community and find out who they are through that and build up their base through that and build up a base of power through that. I think in very real ways, a lot of the black musicians that we heard of coming off the Chipman circuit came to prominence specifically from being able to find power in their own communities, and that power is irrevocable, even when you get to later phases. So I think it's all about power building. I think it's actually a necessary thing, as Rue said. It's not as though everybody has to be an actual activist. People don't need to be Nelson Mandela, but we do need musicians to be able to ask the question to themselves, what does my power look like? And how do I get in touch with it if I don't have it? That, I believe, is actually one of the first steps. And when I say power, I'm deliberately not talking about viewers or likes or subscriptions. I'm talking about something that sustains you through the dark days. And you can tell that it's power because it also gives power back to those folks around you. That's why music is the thing that marks movements. That's why when we talk about the civil rights movement, we talk about the songs first. There's a very real thing that we have, this opportunity where we get to be the kind of chapter headings in between history. And more than ever, we need those songs now.
Beautifully said. Salam, did you have anything that you wanted to tack on to the same question about ways that artists can start to engage more in their own community?
Yeah, that's pretty much the philosophy and concept behind world music development. Again, how to utilize music to even start making a difference in your own community. So, you know, we've talked about this. Music has the power of uniting and bringing people together. And when it does that, it allows the artist to have that message. Now, some do have a message, some don't. You know, there are artists that do refer to their lyrics as being socially conscious lyrics, you know, and those are the kind of artists who can really deliver a message to their fans and their audience, but not just delivering a message. What you see, for example, with world music development, what we do with artists, we utilize our artists for doing fundraising for causes that affect our communities, you know, and we've come up with what we call the 5 pillars of progress, or 5 pillars of peace, and those are education, housing, nutrition, healthcare, and economic development. You need to be educated, you got to have a roof over your head, you got to have food in your belly, you got to be healthy, and whatever your source of economy is, you need to continue to develop that, because then that reduces the amount of stress on society. You know, look at the unrest we're seeing right now. It's happening on many levels. It is happening on the racial level. It's happening because of the economic stresses that everybody is feeling as well, you know, and it's multiplying, and we're seeing that even stronger than before. So that right there shows how important those 5 pillars are, that whenever there is an imbalance in that, in any shape or form that it happens, from the lack of education, which is lack of understanding each other, to lack of money in your pocket because the economy is struggling, that's when we're going to see instability in communities and unrest. I grew up in Iran. I saw as a young kid when a revolution happened there. And when I look back at it now to kind of try to understand it of why it happened, it was because these 5 things were not in balance over there, you know. So that's why they became really important to me personally. But again, that's, you know, an example of what artists can do, is to go support the org. You know, there's organizations out there in your own community that are always doing fundraising events. Fundraising events always has some sort of music, something like that involved in it. So I ask artists, go out there, give back, and get involved in those things that matter to you. So that's how I think artists can make a difference.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to the next question. And I'm going to start, let's start with Rue on this one. What kind of economic impact does live music have on local economies around the world?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I think that locally, I have found that many consumers or people who would attend shows or who enjoy live music would probably answer this and say that concert tickets are too expensive and often outside of the reach of many people who really need the feeling of live music. And I think that when it comes to the economy of locale, you know, working in nightlife in Denver before the weed craze and then after the weed boom, right? I've seen what it looks like on both sides. So I see that your budget goes from like this amount to produce an event, but then if like Snoop Dogg's smoking weed, it goes to this amount, right? And that's important because, one, there's money that pours into the economy of the music industry with like venues and promoters and marketers and other people who make money in those ways. Where we have an opportunity to challenge and push back is what that money looks like in our communities for musicians and for artists. And how what the trickle-down effect or lack thereof looks like within the local community of players and musicians and artists and all these people who are involved. So if, artist A is a very highly established, well-heeled, nationally touring musician and they're getting paid, an exorbitant amount of money, how do artists who are opening up those shows, how do they get paid? What do they have to do in order to make money? What does that do to the economy of locals and local musicians, and then also people who attend shows? So one thing that I found to be very important, and this was my case study in like what live music does for economies, which is like not like a real case, like scientific case study, but I did it myself. So D'Angelo, on his return tour, for the Black Messiah album, he played at the Ogden Theater in Denver. And the Ogden is like a really great place to see the comeback show of an artist that you love, especially if you're a musician, because he's such a player in the stage and the sound and the looks. And it has all the things that one needs to see to have that experience. I saw Prince there in like an 1,100 person capped room. Like you needed to be in the room to experience that. It was healing. It like actually changed my life. And I saw this D'Angelo show, and I got in because of the work that I do, because it was sold out and all these other things. And it was incredible, and it was everything that I thought it was going to be. But what I found was that a lot of musicians or other people who love playing music and seeing music, maybe even more than me, didn't have access to that space because tickets were so expensive. And for a comeback album and an artist like D'Angelo and artists that we love and that we evangelize on behalf of, no one is saying that they deserve to be paid less. But there has to be a balance and a happy medium between making sure that artists are taken care of. That's also the equal economy of how economies become more successful as well. To the people who want to see this show and have it actively support the economy on an intrinsic level, meaning the more people see live music, the happier people are, the more they can be healed by this sight and sound. And so I developed a program which we call the Blacklist, which is just kind of a play on our company name, that offers an opportunity for promoters and businesses to allot a certain amount of tickets to us that we would then distribute at cost-accessible prices. And by cost-accessible, I mean free, right? And so because there is a way that everyone can kind of hold their weight and do a little bit so that everyone gets enough. And that works out on certain levels, and I think that it has helped not only open the door for more the healthy economy of musicians who are involved, but it also, I believe, strengthens the morale for people who attend live music so that they can then express that and explore that with others, and it trickles out to the community instead of hoping that it eventually trickles down. So I think one of the first things of having a healthy and successful music economy is taking a look at those who need to receive and be on the receiving end of the connection with that live music first. So that's where I always start when I think of whether or not it's healthy is, are the people being served first? Are the musicians locally being taken care of? And then we know that we've got something successful happening.
Thank you for that, Rue. I want to follow up with something you said and pose it to maybe Stefan or Sam, whichever of you would like to comment on it. But you were talking about how you can have a healthy music economy. So my question is, how can you help foster a healthy local music economy?
Stefan, go for that one. I'll let you take that first.
So one of the reasons I was actually late for this call is that I was talking with Lisa G., who's one of the people who runs Denver Arts and Venues and has run several initiatives specifically along these lines. Because when we start talking about creative economy, we could also just kind of think about it as like creative ecology. And you start looking at like what are the things that are like in the topsoil? What are the things that allow for another generation of musicians to come up? And what we're finding is that it's not Ogden theaters, it's not mission ballrooms, it's small DIY places, it's genre-specific places, it's all ages venues. Like Denver a lot of times likes to big up all of the national acts that we've produced, But one of the things that we do at the same time that we're bigging up those things is we're not looking at like, does the topsoil still exist for the next Lumineers? And the answer is no. There was one of the ways that you foster this is by making sure that there are like access points where, like, to make it less fancy, like a band needs to be able to suck consistently at a place at low risk until they get better. That's a very specific type of venue that is linked, that it can't be like linked to an AEG. It usually has to be like individually owned. There have to be like these kind of places. And then before that, you start looking at like, well, what are music programs like? What are arts programs like? Denver School of the Arts was established specifically in 5 Points to give black children access to high-level arts education. If you go to DSA now, you do not find the students from the neighborhood in the classes. Now, rich parents. There was a point in time where I used to teach at a private school, and I remember like parents getting their students ready to apply to DSA. These kids who have had private tutors their entire lives, right? I think we get to see different points in times in which Denver did have good gateways and like great topsoil for great bands and artistic expression and scenes to kind of organically grow up. But really, I mean, you could speak to this, like half of the places that used to have like banging open mic nights, like in Aurora and Denver, where like you got to see teenagers and grown folks like sharpen their craft and all these skills, those places are gone. And we'll still like hold up our music industry, but there's actually, we're not developing folks. It's the same thing that's happening just like economically within the city. Like, so one of the largest growing populations in Denver, like one of the fastest growing populations are black people with degrees. But one of the things is that those black people with degrees are not from Denver. We're not producing them. Denver public schools are largely failing our students of color, and our graduation rates among students of color are embarrassing. So at the same point in time, I think we're actually looking at a point where we are hemorrhaging musicians who aren't, as Rue was saying, able to get as much of that pie. Like there's less going around. And then like we can look from like 2010 to 2020, rent rates have doubled. What used to be like an apartment that was a one-bedroom loft that was like $868 in 2010 is now $1,660, right? So as you were talking, Sam, like when we talk about housing and all of these other things, musicians and artists are always the canary for the economic health of a city, of a state, of a nation. And when your musicians start leaving, that means that all these other people within the margins also can no longer survive. The whole reason the Flowbots even came to be, like, I lived in Baker and I paid $300 a month for 10 years. So that made it possible for me to work a night shift at UPS, right? And then like coach kids during the day and still have time to practice and not be going broke because my UPS job could pay for that. So there are things that I think are like really great. This is jumping a few questions ahead, but I want to get this in and talk about it later. So there's the CARES grant that Denver Arts and Venues is coming out with next month. Think of it as kind of like the PPP loan for businesses. Specifically, like several $1 million have been made available for musicians who have lost revenue because of COVID. It's an actual like relief act. And that's going to be released around October 2nd. So sign up for the Denver Arts and Venues newsletter. If you're a Colorado musician and you've lost revenue, which all of us have from canceled gigs, that's one way. It's not, Lisa herself says, it's like it's not equitable, it's not as dope as she wants it to be, but it is something. And then also there's a thing like the Music Advancement Fund, which I'll talk about in a second. But there are different ways in which there are opportunities, but I do think the priority of Denver right now, even though at the same time that we're trumping up musicians and stuff like that, we are not making it possible for musicians to stay here. The priority in Denver has been with developers, and when you do that, you deprioritize one of the reasons that people are moving here. Like weed is one of the reasons, but also people love coming here for like the music and art scene. And then the music and art scene, like specifically, what was it? We had like almost 100,000 people specifically in the creative sector in like music, dance, visual arts. And they brought in $2 billion to the state of Colorado in 2019, right? So it was a massive thing, but if you start looking at how it breaks down, we still see a kind of trickle down that is a pattern that still represents inequality and is just getting worse for everybody in the margins.
Rue, did you want to speak on that point?
Well, yeah, I mean, also wanting to double cheer on the CARES Act work that Lisa has been putting together. I was talking to Shane Shapiro about that as well. So, yeah, I think all of those things are so true. And I think, you know, I'm not a native to Denver, so I always have to be very, very careful with how I present my, like, whatever. But I lived in Denver a long time. My favorite coffee shop is, you know, now a sushi restaurant. So it's like, I've been there long enough. But yes, all of those things are true. It's not necessarily like Denver has an infrastructure that, you know, that you can hang your hat on and say is how local artists are able to benefit from the economics. I mean, and I do work with AEG and Live Nation, and I do know how hard it is for locals to get on. Like, I know how, like, so specifically how hard, because one, the landscape of booking has changed so tremendously over the years, in addition to locals, especially hip-hop artists, just having no idea, zero resources, and no guidance on how to get into the pipeline. And I'm someone who, like, works in the community and also is a part of the community, and even I look around like, wow, this is not necessarily designed for people who are not, like, well-versed on this advocacy shit to actually make it, and it is difficult. And if it's difficult for artists to be supported on an economic level, just by getting paid, it's doubly difficult for artists to find, you know, guidance and mentoring. And I'm talking about the adults. Like, I don't even know, I mean, the kids, like, I'm 36, right? Like, I can't even imagine being 18, 19 years old and trying to make it in this community as it stands. And I think that that's so important, because that does need to change. And we do tout, Denver does tout its live music, like we're the new Austin, or, you know, what we've all heard, you know, all these different things. But there is still very much a gap between those who have the resources and those who need the resources.
Just want to add something to this. So, like, it's interesting when you look at other cities, because, like, there's lots of things that Denver does very well. My family's from North Carolina, and I had a cousin come out, and my cousin brought a friend who does a lot of promotion in North Carolina, and he was just like, "Oh, I'm loving the vibe out here." I was like, "Maybe I'll get something popping over here. Like, do you have some, like, radio connections so I can get, like, the local stuff played?" And I was like, "Ah!" Because in North Carolina, that's what they'll do. Like, on the big radio stations, they'll have tons of opportunity where they'll let local acts shine, and they'll promote for those acts. Here, like, we got the drop, which is amazing, right? But, like, that's not, like, 107.5, like, will play some local acts on Sunday for, what, an hour, and I don't even know how you get on that. Because I've seen so many talented brothers and sisters coming through and never get, like, a whiff of that time. So it's also just one of the things, like, I would love to actually... It's one thing to complain about this, right? But that's not what we're doing here. I think we can also, as musicians, kind of advocate for some of these changes. We need to study other models, and the infrastructure that we don't see, we need to build. And there are organizations like Denver Arts and Venues and a lot of other ones here that actually will, like, do want to, like, do something about it. But once again, like, the innovation is probably going to come from us.
Thank you both for that. Well, let's pass this one really quick. You know, maybe, Sam, if you want to go for this one, how, and anyone else, please tack on if there's anything to add. This one's pretty simple to explain, but what kind of economic impact does live music, I'm reading the wrong one, guys, it's been a long day. How can you collaborate with a specific cause around a release or live stream show?
Say that again, please.
How can you collaborate with a specific cause around a release or a live stream show?
How can you, well, you know, one of them is get involved with an organization like us. You know, we do a lot of things like that. So this is a place for self-promotion right here. Again, you know, go look around, go search around of the organizations that you believe in and what they're doing in your community. Now, let me tell you something about where I'm at, being in the mountains. That live streaming thing is not a norm for a lot of people over here, you know. So we also have a role as artists who know how to do that, an organization who knows how to do that, to offer that to other organizations to hopefully teach them, you know, how to do those streams to benefit a cause and everything. But that's my 2 cents right there, you know. Go find the organizations, you know, don't, and here, I want to add this, because this came up in a conversation on another call with somebody else for me, that when people say that they can't make a difference or they're just one person and where do they start, you know, and this is where I want to emphasize, start locally. That's where it all starts. It can start with your neighborhood first, before it expands even to then your town or city that you're in, and that's how you make a difference. But if you just sit on the sidelines and watch, especially this day and age, you're just going to be very upset. And we unfortunately see the conversations that are happening on social media and how divisive they are right there, because to me that's a sign people have lost hope, you know. And I want to keep the hope going and get involved in your own neighborhood and community first.
Thank you, Sam. Rue, did you have anything that you'd like to add on how an artist can collaborate with a specific cause around a release or a live stream event?
Well, yeah, I think logistically one of the best things, well, and I think there's sometimes, I'm guilty of this too, I can get caught up in a lot of these like very nebulous scenarios, and in reality what many artists and musicians need is like a direct answer to the question. Holy cat. So the first thing is that if an artist wants to collaborate with an organization or a company that they feel like their values align with around a release or event, the first thing they need to do is determine if their values do in fact align with that organization. And that's true because like many people think things based on the surface, and when it comes down to like artists really, really putting their stamp on something that connects with a company, it's easy to like overlook something, and the next thing you know, you're giving an apology on the internet for days because you collaborated with like someone who's done potentially nefarious and evil things. So that's one thing. The other thing is, just try. I would say do a lot of this stuff with no fear. And even if you have the fear, do it anyway, because we are in completely unprecedented times. So if you want to get together with all of your friends and everyone in your band and produce a live Zoom event, then like do that, because many more people also know what you're doing in a way that will allow you to feel confident in that work, because tons of people are doing this kind of stuff. And so I think logistically, knowing that it's possible and then aligning yourself with an organization that specifically matches your values, that is probably the first 2 big steps to being successful.
That was great. Thank you so much, Rue. Before I move on, did anyone want to add anything to that? Yeah, go ahead, Stephen.
I think just kind of amplifying what was said before. A lot of times, if you think about certain causes like a birthday cake, musicians are a lot of times the icing. And so that means we're brought into a process, and that means like a lot of times like the way in which it was built, we have no input on. I do think it's a wonderful time and opportunity for musicians to actually like kind of get deeply involved with something and build a very real relationship, so that like our ideas and innovation can also be implemented earlier in the process. And in that way, if there are maybe some things that we don't agree with, we're in relationship with the organization to actually talk about it and have like a reason for it, or you already know that you're not going to mess with those people. But I do think once again, a lot of times we're kind of trained to be the icing, not understanding that a lot of the other gifts that we have are really essential parts of the basic recipe. And I think if we can see that in ourselves and understand like, no, our job is not just to like show up and perform. We can do a lot more. I think that would be, that's been made a massive difference for my band. has made a massive difference for us as activists and how we show up. So yeah, I recommend that too. And I think we can also we can do join up with folks, do live streams and all of those things. But I think it's also just feels so much more satisfying when it's actually a real relationship and it's an organization that you know. And this is Puma, by the way.
I love it. Thank you for that. And actually, Stefan, while you're here, I'd like to bring the next question to you. On your TED Talk, you said that your role as a musician is to engage people through their pain to the power. Can you tell us more about the ways that you identify and harness this within your own art?
Yeah. Sorry, like my background is education, so I just keep on like using examples so I can try to be more clear. But just to explain like the pain to power thing first. Blues music, right? The subject matter is not joyful. People are not singing about the happiest day of their lives, right? People are singing about deep heartache, deep pain, and they're singing to it with such authenticity and specificity that it somehow speaks universally, right? But then what happens if a bunch of people are sitting in a room listening to the blues? Do they get sadder? No, what ends up happening is that like everybody starts feeling like they can connect on the same emotion, and then you're not alone. And then you know that whatever blues that you're feeling, you're not holding by yourself. So it goes to like from isolation and desolation to catharsis and a feeling of being held communally. For me, that's some of the beautiful alchemy, that music is one of the best technologies to do that. If we look at, like, I know it's kind of like brusque in some ways to start talking about music as technology, but sometimes I think I need to do this to code switch for people sometimes so we can understand like what's happening. Music is one of the best pieces of technology to allow us to go from one emotional state to another very quickly. Where a movie might be able to do it in 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 90 minutes. If it's a Christopher Nolan film, that's 2 hours, like 2 hours and like in 45 minutes. But a song can do it in like 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So once that's like understanding that's one of the things that we get to do, right? That like sometimes if somebody's feeling mad and they want to feel more angry, they'll put on this song. Like if they're feeling hyped. So within my own practice, it's been amazing to specifically, like when the band, we're a political band, so we write about what is going on. But at the same time, we want to write to their emotions, but like from what is the emotional trajectory that we're hoping to accomplish with that song? Not the emotional manipulation, but like what is the emotional path that a lot of people are going through? Like maybe we talk about like talking about a friend of ours who was an activist who took his own life, and like, well, so then is that song could be the feeling of helplessness, like the feeling that, oh, what if I'd made that phone call? And maybe the song doesn't necessarily go to a joyous place, but it goes to a place about, well, at least I am saying their name so they will be remembered. Right? I think in a very real way, being able to look at that aspect of your music, and in particular, like what it's like for the individual listening experience, or what is it like when a room full of people, or actually, I guess we're really focusing on like what the individual experience is right now in this context. But what is it like when a group of people are streaming it, right? And they're writing to each other about it. There's a real opportunity for any painful experience to reveal its beautiful like underside, right? Or something like that in these moments. And I think that's one of the most powerful things about music is that emotional state shift. And I think in general, if a bunch of people are feeling pain together and they feel heard, then it doesn't hurt as much.
That was beautiful. Thank you for that. Would anyone like to add anything before I move on to the next question?
Well, did we lose Rue? Is that what happened?
I'm back.
Oh, okay, fantastic.
It just like kicks me off and then I return. So
there we go.
Yeah, back like I never left. Sorry about that.
Welcome back.
You never did, yeah.
I'll actually take the next question to you, Rue. Rue, what are some examples you've seen of successful community engagement? And I'm bringing that question more so from some examples you've seen of community engagement from musicians or from artists.
One really great example of community engagement that I've seen from artists and musicians, the most recent thing, because right now for me, if you're not engaging your community on what is happening in the streets, then I just don't even have time for it. Which is why I was on an earlier panel with you, and I had to stop myself from going on and on about like police brutality and the social uprisings. I was gonna bring up Ronald Reagan and like some more, but I was like, you know what? I'm gonna rein it in because that's what's going on right now. That's what the community cares about right now. We care about the energy of whether or not we'll be able to make it through tomorrow. And we care about the energy of those who have the resources and have not shared the resources, or at the very least have made the resources further and further away from the reach of those who need it, right? So any artist who's not engaging on the community on that level, I'm not interested in. And I don't find it to be effective in any way. No one is going to listen to your song about your Mercedes-Benz 20 times in a row while the forests are burning, the elders are crumbling from lack of health care and otherwise, and, you know, people are running amok in the streets. So to that end, what I've seen to be really effective and really great community engagement is most recently, because of the murder of Elijah McClain by the Aurora Police Department, I saw lots of different artists and other people who work in the music industry, myself included. I'm not an artist, but I was included because of the work, came together to create a piece of art that essentially was an open letter to the DA, but also a reminder to community that we are all we've got in this space, and that if we don't use our voices, then there will be no voices. And so everyone came together and created this video that was put out, and I really feel like brought it home for a lot of people who didn't really know what to do with their hands. They're like, well, I want to say something, but I don't really know how to say something. What I have to say isn't going to be like James Baldwin scholarly, so what can I do? And I thought it was really unique because it really engaged a lot of people in ways that they hadn't necessarily been involved before. So that's something that I found to be successful in terms of community engagement. I've been to a ton of fundraisers and events and just all kinds of ways that the community is engaged. But what to me seemed to stick out that are most successful are the ones that people can feel active within, and that they can have something tangible that they take from and then say, okay, so I went to this protest, but now I know how to activate around city council, or I listened to this song and now I feel like I can activate around, police brutality or any of these other social issues. And so I think giving the community something that they can take for themselves and then translate in their own way and put out into the community their own way, those are the best ways and the most successful ways that community engagement works, because no one wants to be pandered to. And I think that because we're in a political season, that kind of thing is like just naturally happening. And community doesn't want to be like lectured to, and artists don't want to feel like they have to be the ones to lecture, right? So when it feels collaborative and when it feels like, the coming together of big energy around music, like Stefan said, that, that the way that the crowd energy can be controlled, even online, people can feed off of that same energy online. You can tell when the community is engaged. And I think smart musicians know how to really agitate that energy in a positive way. Like Fight the Power. Like I hear Fight the Power and I feel the exact same way every time I hear it. Every time. Every time that song comes on, I just want to like put down what I'm doing and look around at the first oppressor within sight and be like, here's a list. Here's a list of all the ways that y'all have like done us wrong, like to the guillotine, and that is like positive. I mean, dramatic. It's late, so I'm like, whatever. But I'm, really, truly, that's the way I feel activated and very positive is when something moves me to action.
Thank you for that. Tom or Stefan, did either of you want to give an example of successful community engagement that you've seen from creatives?
Well, I can go ahead, Stefan. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's like I felt like Rue shut that thing down. And the only thing I was gonna recommend is that I think there's enough of us that like we might be able to keep the mics on, just to kind of give it the ambiance. So like when I'm cracking up at you reading some oppressors, like I think we'll be fine. Yeah, it's like we got enough folks, but like Sam, please go ahead.
Thank you. Now, I don't want to say this is necessarily effective or the best thing. I can only use what I've done with my own band and through world music development. We have a program that's called Play for a Cause, which we go and support these nonprofits in the 5 areas that I mentioned earlier when they're doing their own fundraising event. And like I said, a lot of times these fundraising events have an entertainment aspect and live music being a part of it. So we provide the artist free of charge. A lot of times we provide the sound system, engineer, everything free of charge to this event or these events that we've worked with. But since 2018, we've done roughly about 20 of these now. I think we did about 12 of them in 2019 and now, or excuse me, in 2018, and then 8 of them in 2019, and unfortunately none right now. But between all of those, in those 2 years, we helped these organizations combine raise a little over $150,000, you know, and I've been keeping track of it, of how much these organizations have raised. And you got to remember some of these benefits, because we also help promote it with our band. So there's people that even show up sometimes to these causes or benefits without even knowing that it's a cause or a benefit. They're just coming because they're a fan of our band, and they're coming there, and then they find out, oh, there's this thing going on. So then they start donating and supporting that. So that increases the fundraising efforts for that organization as well. But you know, 150, a little over 150,000 for our small little community up here in the mountains, that's not a bad thing. Now, let me tell you what that did for what I call my tribe, my friends in the band that I play music with. Putting those numbers and keeping track of it over the few years and actually putting it in front of them, it made they were in awe. They were going, what? We helped raise how much money? So what that did in return, it really motivates them, you know. So when the artists, when the ones that think they can't make a difference, and you put it on paper and you have numbers that they can look at, it's like, no, you went and made this difference. That's an example I can use. I know it's, again, self-promotion, but hey, it's late at night and it's my event, right?
It's my event. It's my show.
It's my
I'll kick you all off if I like this. It's my spotlight. I'm in the mountains. Give me some shine. So actually, and hearing that, like, I feel like there's almost professionally that's what I've been doing, kind of a thing. Is trying to like make these kind of opportunities and try to provide other ones for folks. And I mean, I think Youth on Record itself is an example of one of those things. And it's a very real way of like, it's a bunch of bands who were lucked out, were able to, I mean, it was a band that was lucked out, was able to get access to certain resources, and then very consciously decided to redirect it towards the community. And we're still in this experiment to see how it works. But then something else I think is like really important to kind of see is like, once you have this kind of orientation, you're going to do some of the best shows of your life when you're doing it for something that you really give a damn about. So like even in like my bio, like one of the names of the people I got to share stages with was Emily Keys. Now Emily Keys is not Desmond Tutu or Chuck D. Emily Keys was a young woman from Bailey, Colorado, who like we connected with when we played at a Peace Jam showcase. And this is when we weren't signed. This is because we actually had a relationship with Peace Jam because of our work as educators and as a band that gives a damn. So by the time when this Peace Jam performance came by, they're like, we want y'all to play because we believe you that this is the kind of work that you want to do. And so that's when we opened for Desmond Tutu, right? And that's not like a record deal or any of these things. And we got to play for like, I don't know, like 5,000 kids who all came together from all over the state to present their plans on how to bring more peace to their local communities. And they get to present these plans to Nobel Peace Prize laureates, right? That was one of the best shows we've ever played. And what it did for our band, I think after that show, we were so much tighter and so much more aligned. It was like your band being able to see the spreadsheet about like how much impact they had. Like I think we don't talk about like the metrics of like doing measurable good. And one of the things about doing measurable good is like you actually have to be prepared to see that metric. It's not like somebody can just say you did good. It's like, no, like it has to be in alignment with what you perceive as being good. So that's one of the tough things. But that's why like if you have a real relationship, I can't tell you how many band fights were squashed because of how we were able to connect with those young people on that show. Like after that show, I felt like everybody in the band kind of became activists, right? And that was the show where we met Emily Keys and her family and all those things, and we took a photo, you know, and like the way the work she was there doing such amazing work, and that's why like I still highlight her. But it's the other thing that we're not talking about is just like it's really fun. It is so much fun, y'all. And I think just a little like soapbox moment. The word activist that we're using now, kind of with the big A, is a modern invention, pretty much kind of established around 1985. And most of the social movements that we talk about, those people did not identify themselves as professional activists. They were people who cared. And I just want us to understand, like, as musicians, we do not need to be the big A activists with all of the right lingo, with, like, all the understanding and all the analysis and lenses. Like, no, we just need to be in communication with our community. And as Rue said, like, we get to use that because we don't have to translate. If we're talking to our communities, like, they need to hear it from their own folks, what's going on and what's important, or where their hearts are breaking and all those things. And there's a real power in that. And it's really amazing. It's a lot of fun. It really is a lot of fun.
Thank you for saying that. Would either of you like to tack anything onto that before I go on to the next question? Okay. All right. I wanted to touch real quick on Youth on Record. Can you describe some of the efforts that are being done at Youth on Record, the Denver nonprofit that you co-founded?
Yes. And I just want to talk a little bit about how it happened, because how it happened wouldn't have happened, I think, in almost any other city. Like, when Flowbot started Youth on Record, we were a local band. And when we created this nonprofit, we very, very clearly had no idea what we were doing. Like, being able to, like, put some rhyming words together around, like, social justice issues does not prepare you to run a 501c3. But the fact that, like, we were engaged in Denver, Denver is a small, big city, so we were able to quickly make connections with people who knew what they were doing, people like with ideas, and like we got better and better and better at what we were doing until like now where Youth on Record is beyond any of our wildest imaginations, and it's not Flowbot's project. It was just something that we started that the city we feel needed. So now in its current iteration, Youth on Record teaches liberation through music, right? A lot of times people are like, oh, you try to make professional musicians. I'm like, I don't care if they're professional musicians. That's fine. I want them to be liberated young people. And we use music as a delivery method because that's where young people are. Like, you take any young person, like they care about like their music. So we use music and the creation of music as a way for them to legitimate and refine their own voices in the ways that they want to. And then in that process, we're trying to teach them about different lenses, history, relationships with oppression, and more importantly, resistance, so that like our young people are coming out with at least some sort of ability to be able to manage the oppressive context that they're within. Because I think if you're not honestly trying to do that through education, I don't know what you're doing, particularly with the students that we're dealing with. All of our teachers are professional musicians from the local music scene. Nobody works for free. And we teach classes along the lines of everything from spoken word poetry to ethnic studies to production to podcast and radio arts. But liberation is the baseline for all of these things. It's a very like kind of Freirean, Bettina Love, abolitionist education model. If our kids aren't getting more free, then it's a waste of time. And we're constantly trying to find more and more ways to innovate and outmaneuver oppression, because we need to be doing that, and particularly right now with most of our students who are in the margins of society, they're being even more affected and neglected by the educational gaps that have been highlighted by COVID. So, but also, yeah, so that's Youth on Record. We've been going for about 11 years now.
Congratulations on that. I moved to Denver in 2008, and I don't even know if it was being referred to as Youth on Record at that point. I think it was, I know the evolution came, and it has just become this just staple in our community, and the work that you guys do is just so fantastic. I've been a music ambassador now with you guys for a couple of years, and the things that you do to amplify the community as well, it's awesome. And I've been touring the country, out of a van with, some guys during most of my 20s, and crisscrossing the country. I really never saw anything else like it. It's really neat. So congratulations to all that you're doing. And if anyone that's watching wants to find out more, you can go to youthonrecord.org. I'm going to go now to our.
I just want to add. Oh, yeah. I want to add something. I just think it's really important to kind of say, like, one of the main components that really made Youth on Record what it is like bold, incredible female leadership. I think I'm not saying that like any one identity kind of creates like the thing, but I think that like this kind of holistic model that we have has come from like the women who've really like come in and like run this organization and made it what it was. Because how it started was like one thing. Where it is definitely a collaborative effort. And so thank you for like congratulating me. But I really think that like in many ways Youth on Record is the city's accomplishment. And I do think like even though like the topsoil and stuff in Denver is eroding, you still have a lot of people who really give a damn. And I think actually in Denver and in Colorado at large, you have musicians who really care in a way that I don't find as regular in other places. So I think that's one of the reasons why Youth on Record happened here. And there are a few like places like in Florida that we found like some organizations that are similar. In Salt Lake City, there's a neutral zone, but it's taken us years to find them. But like it's really dope to see that there are like-minded practices that we can also get crib notes from. But yeah, thank you again.
Well, congratulations, Denver, and everyone involved. We love you guys, though. Songwriting can help channel your energy, whether it's in support of a movement or in response to the oppression that caused the need for it. What advice do you have for artists when it comes to lending your art to a movement? We'll go ahead and start with Rue, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think, I don't know the process of songwriting. I've often been kind of around for like the end result of what that looks like. But when it comes to speaking for the times, like I think looking at some of the greats who've done that and really looking at what their blueprint looks like. And I think the creative process is the creative process, and pushing it a little too hard might, you don't want to sound like you're just like reading from your Twitter timeline. Too. Like, I don't know, maybe that could actually be a marketing strategy. But I think like some of the greats, like some of the real, the jazz musicians who are like speaking up for themselves and really making a way in their lane. And then also looking at like some of the people who didn't necessarily present all the time as like an activist with the A. I'm going to use it all the time now. So, I think, I'm not necessarily the best person to ask about the songwriting, but as someone who is a consumer of music, I wanted to feel honest. I wanted to feel comfortable. I wanted to feel like it is a normal thing for someone to use their words to talk about the signs of the times, and also someone who is informed as well, because I think people. Someone brought it the other day, like Tupac. They were like, I like Tupac more than Biggie because I feel like Tupac was just so much more of a revolutionary, and like he made all these songs that were just all about like changing the world and all of that. And I was like, I mean, yeah, but he also made I Get Around, you know, and he also made I Want It, and he also made like and there's nothing wrong with that, you know. You don't listen to Live and Die in LA and think that Tupac doesn't have something incredible to say because of his experience. So I want to hear something that moves me and feels natural.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I was having a conversation the other day with someone, you know, and they were kind of talking about how people really just don't want to see, you know, what they used to see on their Instagram feed or from artists that they follow. Like, unless you have something of substance to say, then, you know, maybe don't waste space that should maybe be given to someone else at that time. And I think that that's resonating with a lot of artists that I'm friends with who, you know, feel like they don't know what to say, or they feel like maybe they shouldn't say anything at all in their music because that's not the kind of music they write, but they also just don't feel like writing anything else because it feels like this is such a moment where you don't need to be pushing anything that's trying to take away from something more important. I don't know how you feel about that.
I feel a couple of ways. I feel that, like, part of me is like, okay, if you don't know what to say, then you don't say anything at all. And then part of me is like complicit, you know? And it makes me feel icky. It's like, well, but then the other part of me is like, okay, so how, if I was an artist, how would I work that in? But I just think being honest about where we are in the world should be, and letting it flow naturally can be an easy occurrence. I mean, I was really upset that, this might sound trite, but I was really upset that, like, Kendrick Lamar didn't emerge from whatever, like, diamond encrusted hole he's in to, you know, talk about the uprising and to be there with us while we use his music as the catalyst for our energy. I was like, where is he? Like, I'm offended, you know? I don't want Drake to put out a new record unless it's all about, like, this shit, you know? And I think, and like, I thought, I was like, maybe I'm being a little irrational in that regard. But then I decided that whether I'm being irrational or not, these are the people who have soundtracked so much of not just my life, but like the radio and like all these other things. They should be saying something. It shouldn't all be left up to what I lovingly call, you know, the backpack constituency. Like, you know, I shouldn't have to listen to like Jay Electronica to find out the mysteries of life, you know what I mean? Like, I want you guys talking about it. If you're gonna be, I don't want to scroll your Instagram and see like Drake hanging out on his like diamond encrusted dive board at home. Like, that's, you know, read the room, know, you know, know what's going on, really. And I think it does put a lot of pressure on artists. But as a consumer, I do need, like, when Dolly Parton came out and said that people need to start understanding Black Lives Matter, I was like, this is what I'm talking about, you know? Like, Dolly Parton, as always, has the answers, first and foremost.
Yes.
And she's doing it in a way that maybe, you know, even though privately she's always been about that life and that kind of activist life, but, you know, that was really one of the major times when she stepped onto her political soapbox, and I thought it was timely and prime, and it didn't really seem outside of like the repertoire necessarily. So I think there can be a balance.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Did anyone, Stefan or Sam, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, and actually, just can you rephrase it again? I mean, not rephrase it. Can you just state the question again?
Sure. What advice do you have for artists when it comes to lending your art to a movement?
Oh, I think this is so not a linear, straightforward answer. Because there's also like my band has been on the other side, where we're corny because we're always talking about this stuff, which I'm fine with, because I'm corny. That's fine. I got no problem with that. Yeah, I'm a social justice warrior. Take it. Doesn't hurt my feelings one bit. But I do think behind that, there's just so many things wrapped up into how is the world ready to hear your voice? what was it? Jay-Z, when there's a documentary about the Black Album. I don't know if you've seen that one, Rue. And he's in the studio, and there's another rapper in the room, and Jay-Z's kind of like asking him like, why do you rap about these kind of things? And the guy's like, well, this is like the kind of stuff that the label's telling me to write because this is the only thing that will sell. And then like Jay-Z swivels towards the camera. He's like, see, America, do you see what you're doing to your young black artists? Type of a thing. So I think on the other side of it is both external and internalized ideas about like how we can even use our voices, which is, whenever I'm looking at these problems, I want to look at them 360 degrees. So I don't think it's just a coincidence that you'll find a lot of black artists who are particularly in hip hop, which in many ways, if not, was not an activist necessarily art form, but it was liberatory, where like people who had very little were reclaiming space. Like the 5 elements of hip hop, if you believe that they're synthetic or organic, like they were all about taking up different types of space and being able to, in that space, be able to affirm that you're a person, right? It was a ritual of being able to do that stuff. Right now, as far as the market, people are encouraged to use hip hop as a ritual to accumulate individual wealth. That's not an accident that we have redirected this art form that we're using to liberate ourselves, and has been redirected towards where the power doesn't flow back into the community, right? So it's also not a surprise. Like this one of the things I said earlier, like this is one of the reasons like these tools we're unfamiliar with them. And this goes back to what I was saying about like black IP being like taken and used to sell things. Like all of these genres that black people came up with in the United States of America was a form of medicine to deal with how crappy the world was being manufactured around them. And I think on the shadow side of all, like the even more shadowy side is like now at this point in time, if people are trying to talk about real stuff, like the audience is not necessarily as ready, and people aren't ready themselves. But like folks are still doing it. Like I was so hyped when DaBaby came out with his song. I was like, come on, like if DaBaby's doing, like where's J. Cole at? Where's Kendrick? Like where is everybody? I do feel like though, like Kendrick's gonna like step out of like a cave. I think he's gonna step out of a cave of like some like beastly.
I just don't know. I'm like, we've been using "All Right" as a protest anthem.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like why are you doing this? You know, and I understand it, but I don't want to go on a rant about like black capitalism and the idea of like maybe he doesn't think it's a part. I don't know. Like maybe he thinks he's too rich and has moved beyond it. Like Lil Wayne said, you know, that broke my heart when Wayne said that. I was like, say that, you know. One thing I want to also say about what Stephen just said is that Jay-Z clip. I think that that Black Album documentary was filmed in like 2004 or something,
yeah.
You know, and like that was the precursor to artists who are like actively accepting jewelry and cars for like record label payments. You know, this is the trickery of the economy that we were talking about. This is the you know, the sleight of hand that black artists are often like the victims of because and their intellectual property is like off, you know, into the wind. So, and I know we can talk about this stuff all night, but I just wanted to know that was like in 2004, and then here we are, you know, all these years later, and we're still seeing even more of that. Now it's also like, now the artists are like taking drugs and like drinking, cough syrup, and all these other things that they're doing. I sound like an old lady, but I mean, it's all part of the These kids are drinking cough syrup. They are drinking cough syrup. And we are presenting like it's what needs to happen in the economy. So, I don't know. They are drinking cough syrup.
Oh, wait, but like, sorry, but is there a positive framing at the end of this question? Sorry, like, I'm just like, because I keep on losing track of the question itself, because I also feel like there's a positive.
So I was saying, what advice do you have for artists when it comes to lending your art to a movement? And it was really kind of an open-ended thing, but really I was kind of going from a place of songwriting where, you know, but it really is a bit open-ended there. I wanted to see if anyone has a final thought that they'd like to leave us with before we get off this last panel here. Stefan, Rue, Sam, you can show a raise hand if you want me to call on you. I think I have a bit of
I'll freestyle one. How about we go like me, Sam, and then like let Rue do what she's been doing this whole night and just like shut the session down. How about that?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
I like that.
All right. I haven't spent much time actually talking about. I think I've spent a little bit of time talking about like the positive aspects of things. Well, actually, I kind of reject the negative positive framing kind of thing. I think everything is an opportunity that you either take or do not. And in this moment, I really do feel that with the music industry being so disrupted, as I said before, in 2019, I think in particular, like songwriters and such brought in, and musicians brought in like $2 billion into the Denver economy. We are seeing now by July that we've already lost $1.5 billion of revenue for that sector, right? Artists are suffering. And so I don't want to make light or little of that situation. And I just want to say, like, also what is also an opportunity is that the industry itself is entirely disrupted. So for people who really want to kind of get their hustle and they're building on, this is the time to build an alternative infrastructure. This is the time for people to, like, if you're a band and like maybe your band house is like in some neighborhood, start doing shows there. Start like, where's the neighborhood like you have a real connection with? Can you do a show at like a park? Maybe if you're going to do a show at the park, show up at like when kids aren't going to be playing or something like that, get on the basketball court, put out little tape X's that are 6 feet apart, right? Like show that you're taking care of your community in so many different ways. There's a real opportunity. And the thing is, you do that kind of thing, those folks will also take care of you. It's not, I'm not trying to say that it's easy, but I think that right now people are hungry for what we provide. The magic that we provide that actually allows people to come together and go through different emotional states, that's why music was invented. That's why our ancestors like got together and did this and used music at every point in time. We now can step into that. And the community will be high-fiving us the whole way through. Even like building different ways to reach out to folks, live streams, all of these things. Like there's a bunch of tools in our hands to build a more direct relationship where the extractive middlemen are not necessarily needed. Or maybe if that's what you want, if you're trying to get to a record deal, this is the point in time to be able to establish your own power base. And so when the deals come to you, you'll be able to negotiate from a position of power as opposed to saying like, thank you for giving me a future, right? Which is always a position of weakness and a position of extraction. It will never work out for us. Their lawyers are way better, all of these things. So I know that anybody who's in music right now is suffering and it is hard. And I just want to say that there's also opportunity in this moment that requires a lot of innovation. And you'll actually find that there's things like the Music Advancement Fund, which is actually going on right now if you go to Denver Arts and Venues. And this is for people who are trying to do a yes and for their music. So like it's not for like getting your album out, but this is like for like doing concerts for kids in this neighborhood. This is for people who are trying to give music lessons to the school that like has lost all of their arts and all these things like this. It's the yes and, like people who are wanting to do like what is the additional community good that you can do with your music. The Music Advancement Fund is a entry level granting process. So like if you haven't done any before, this is what this is built for. And they're awarding up to $7,500 to projects for people living in Denver and serving people in the Denver area. And then the CARES grant is going to be out in October, so sign up for the Denver Arts and Venue newsletter now if you like live in Denver, and like you'll be able to apply for ways to kind of to make up for revenue that you've lost for not being able to gig. But then also like beyond that, this is the time for us to be innovative like we always are. I think there's a very real opportunity to start building the alternatives that we've always needed and that this city has been almost like letting go to the wayside.
Thank you, Stefan. Sam, final thought from you?
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Let me tell you guys, it has been a long day and we've had some very awesome discussions throughout the day, but let me tell you, this was the one I personally was really looking forward to. I was really looking forward to having this discussion with Rue and Stefan, and I want to thank you guys so much for being here. This has been such a wonderful, powerful conversation that needs to happen and continue to happen. And I'm going to kind of bring this back a little bit to, hey, how does this tie in with this event today that we did? You know, we did Dulcetterra, which is today being the International Day of Peace, to celebrate that. You know, I have a closing note at the end of the last performance on our showcases that you guys can see later this evening, that I say this, that peace is not easy. You know, it's not, you know, and we are privileged to be able to sit here and say we are celebrating peace, because some others, not even around the world, in our own communities and in our own country, that they don't have peace in their lives, they would laugh at that, you know. I also say that our efforts, as far as our thoughts, words, actions, and deeds, should be in line with peace every day. So again, why are we having this conversation on Peace Day? Well, we have to have tough conversations if we want to make a difference. So I thank you guys again. I would love to do more of these panels with you guys down the line. I tell you, in the mountain community, these discussions are needed more than anywhere else, I tell you, you know, because I think to a certain point, there's blinders on the mountain community, especially with racial issues, that they don't think it exists in our community. But again, it's this thing of, because you don't see it, it doesn't mean it's not there. So I want our audience to know, again, why we had this panel and this discussion as part of World Peace Day, because it doesn't come easy, and we need to have these beautiful, tough conversations in order to move forward and hopefully make a difference. And thank you guys again for being a part of this.
Thank you, Sam. And Rue, please, we'd love to have you close it out.
Well, thank you, and thank you for an amazing day of conversations. The panel that I was on earlier today was equally benefiting in terms of knowledge and charisma from the panelists, and I love being a part of this tonight and being able to riff with y'all just on, you know, the way we think about music and the way we think about involvement and the way we handle community engagement and being leaders and all of these things that are just really always turning in the wheels of our mind, whether you're a musician or whether you're someone who enjoys music. Many of us are often thinking just how can we make our environment better and how can we show up in these spaces and be more effective and a better listener and a better advocate and, you know, all of these things. And it's not easy. And there is no perfect formula. But I know that artists have always been leaders in my life and have always been those that I have aligned myself with as the world turns and as all these things change. And I think that we are going to continue to have more of that. There's going to be methods that change and strategies that change. But one thing that remains for me is authenticity and being genuine to the cause. So I really enjoyed continuing to explore the best ways to support artists so that they can serve the community. And I know what it feels like when I am a part of a community that's being served by artists, and when it feels good and it feels effective and it feels strong and it feels like we can go long and far together. You know, it's that moment when the lights go down at the concert before like the person like comes out onto the stage. You know, it's that feeling every single time. You know, MC Hammer was my first concert. Like, so you know, it's funny because like I knew then. I was like, this is it. I want to do all this. And I was like literally 5 years old, you know, and I remember like the guy next to me had on like a royal blue silk suit and was just like going so hard. And those are the moments, like that's how I knew that I was going to be like working in the industry, you know. I have a tattoo of Biggie on my arm because when he died, what it felt like at that moment was so pivotal for me, being able to access that history. And that's important to me And it's important that there are opportunities for artists to always give that to the community. And I work so hard on behalf of artists because I know what it feels like to be on the, benefiting end of when an artist is like in their bag and hit their stride and killed it and, are doing the right thing. So my life's work, I believe, is to always create more platforms for so many people to experience that feeling. And I believe that conversations like this help get us there, and the work that each of us are doing continues to push the envelope. And I know that the pandemic has been so difficult on all of us, but I do believe that we'll be stronger because of it. I believe the art is going to be more succinct. I believe that we're going to move better and stronger together as a community, and that artists will have more support than ever from their community because we know how much we need each other. So that sounds a little cliche, but you know what? I'm going to stick with it. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to add a couple of other things really quick because of how awesome this conversation's been. My thing was that all of these discussion panels were going to be part of our membership platform that later people can get the membership and go listen to these conversations. But let me tell you, this one right here, this is such a special conversation that we had. That I'm going to release this, and it's not going to be part of the membership platform. So if it's okay with you, I think everybody needs to hear this conversation. So this will be available hopefully tomorrow that everybody can listen into it. And and I can't leave the evening and a day like this, because this came up with an interview with one of the nonprofits that we did, not mentioning to people, please register and vote.
Yes.
I liked what Danny Grant did in one of the panels earlier. She had the dry erase board behind her that she wrote with big letters on it. Vote, I love that. So I can't leave this evening without mentioning that please register and vote. It is a privilege that we all have.
I was hoping that would come up in this panel, Sam, so thank you for bringing that up. Tomorrow is actually National Voter Registration Day, so if anyone wants to go to headcount.org, a lovely partner with musicians is Headcount. If you go to headcount.org, you can find all things that are good, get registered to vote, check and see if you are registered. Again, I want to thank all of our panelists for being here today. Rue Johnson, Stephen Brackett, and the founder of Dulcetterra, Sam Golgoon. Thank you so much for tuning in to Enhancing Communities. Thank you to our panelists for being here tonight.
And thank you for moderating. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for moderating.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah. So just like future.
So smooth.
I love it.
Yeah. It's my Terry Gross voice. It only happens.